The blizzard outside Teterboro Airport was cold, but the look in Captain Richard Sterling's eyes was colder. He pointed a gloved finger at the back of the plane, sneering at the woman in the cashmere coat. "You don't belong in the main cabin," he spat, loud enough for the VIP guests to snicker. "Jump seat, now, or you walk home in the snow." Emma Vance didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply picked up her bag and moved, her silence more terrifying than any threat. Because what Captain Sterling didn't know was that he wasn't just talking to a passenger. He was talking to the woman who had signed his paycheck that morning, and the owner of the $65 million jet he was standing in. The snow was coming down in thick, heavy sheets, blanketing the tarmac of Teterboro Airport in a hush of white. It was Christmas Eve, the kind that usually promised warmth and eggnog by a fire. But out here on the flight line, the wind bit through layers of wool and skin alike. Emma Vance adjusted the collar of her vintage trench coat, pulling it tighter against her neck. At 32, she had the kind of face that people often underestimated. Soft features, wide, observant eyes, and a quiet demeanor that allowed her to blend into the background. Tonight, that invisibility was intentional. She stood inside the warmth of the Meridian FBO terminal, watching the activity on the ramp through the floor-to-ceiling glass. The private aviation terminal was buzzing with the frantic energy of the ultra-wealthy, trying to escape the East Coast freeze for Aspen, St. Barths, or the French Riviera. "Ms. Vance?" Emma turned to see a young desk agent, flushed and harried, holding a boarding pass. "That's me," Emma said, her voice smooth and low. "We have you confirmed on the shared charter to London Heathrow. Flight 704. It's the Gulfstream G650ER, parked at stand 4. They're boarding now." "Thank you," Emma smiled, taking the pass. She glanced at the ticket. "Seat 1A." The agent hesitated, looking at Emma's attire. She looked elegant, yes, but not flashy. No logos screamed from her handbag. No diamonds glittered on her fingers. In a terminal filled with Russian oligarchs and tech bros wearing Balenciaga from head to toe, Emma looked like a high-end librarian. "Is everything all right?" Emma asked. "Oh yes, just... The manifest lists you as a priority global guest. I wasn't expecting... Well, usually the priority guests have an entourage." Emma's smile tightened just a fraction. "I travel light. Merry Christmas." She walked toward the glass doors, stepping out into the biting wind. The agent didn't know that Priority Global was the holding company that had quietly acquired Aurora Aviation, the charter company operating this flight, 3 days ago. Emma wasn't just a guest. She was the new CEO and majority shareholder. This flight was her first inspection, a secret shopper mission to see how her new employees behaved when they thought no one important was watching. The Gulfstream G650ER, tail number N882RCV, was a magnificent beast of a machine. Its fuselage gleamed under the floodlights, the silver paint slick with de-icing fluid. Emma felt a swell of pride. She had grown up in a neighborhood where taking a bus was a luxury. Now she owned wings that could circle the globe. She reached the bottom of the airstairs. The flight attendant, a bubbly young woman named Sarah with perfectly pinned blonde hair, was greeting a couple ahead of Emma. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington. Champagne is already chilled. Captain Sterling will be out to greet you shortly." The Harringtons, Preston and Genevieve, swept past Sarah without a word, furs trailing in the snow. Preston Harrington III was a man Emma recognized from the tabloids, a real estate mogul whose ego took up more square footage than his buildings. Emma stepped up next. Sarah's smile faltered for a microsecond, her eyes scanning Emma's lack of visible jewelry, before pasting the smile back on. "Welcome. Name?" "Emma Vance. I'm in 1A. Sarah checked her iPad, her brows knit together. "Vance! Vance! Ah, yes, the single seat. Right this way." It wasn't the warmest welcome, but it was efficient. Emma climbed the stairs, the smell of jet fuel giving way to the scent of expensive leather and fresh orchids inside the cabin. The interior was stunning. Cream-colored leather seats, walnut veneers and gold-plated fixtures. Emma moved towards seat 1A, the prime captain's chair by the forward window. It offered the most privacy and the best view. She placed her bag in the overhead bin and sat down, exhaling a long breath. She closed her eyes, ready to relax before the scrutiny began. "Excuse me." The voice was deep, commanding, and laced with an irritation that shattered her peace. Emma opened her eyes. Standing over her was the pilot. Captain Richard Sterling looked like he had been cast by a Hollywood director for the role of hero pilot. He was tall, with silver fox hair, a jawline that could cut glass, and a uniform that was pressed to military perfection. On his lapel, the gold wings of Aurora Aviation caught the cabin light, but his eyes weren't heroic. They were hard, assessing, and dismissive. "Can I help you, Captain?" Emma asked, keeping her tone polite. "I think you're confused, miss," Sterling said, not bothering to lower his voice. The Harringtons, settling into the club seats across the aisle, stopped talking to watch. "This is seat 1A. "I know," Emma said, tapping her boarding pass on the armrest. "It's on my ticket." Sterling let out a short, incredulous huff. He leaned down, placing a hand on the back of her headrest, a violation of space that made Emma's skin crawl. "Let me clarify," Sterling said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is a VIP charter. We have a weight and balance protocol to maintain for the transatlantic crossing. Seat 1A is reserved for primary cargo." He glanced over his shoulder at Preston Harrington, giving the mogul a conspiratorial wink. "Mr. Harrington requires the forward cabin for his business meetings. I'm going to need you to relocate." Emma's heart thudded against her ribs. She knew aviation protocols. On a G650 with only 4 passengers, weight and balance for a 130-pound woman was a negligible issue. This wasn't physics. It was power. "I booked this seat specifically, Captain," Emma said, her voice steady but firm. "I paid the full charter share price. Mr. Harrington has the club section. There is plenty of room." Sterling's face darkened. The charm evaporated, replaced by the ugly sneer of a man who wasn't used to being told no, especially not by women who looked like Emma. "Listen to me," he hissed, leaning in closer. "I am the captain of this vessel. My word is law. We are trying to get off the ground before the storm grounds us. I don't have time to argue with a lottery winner who thinks a ticket buys her class." The cabin went silent. Even the air vents seemed to hold their breath. "A lottery winner?" Emma repeated softly. "Move," Sterling commanded, standing up to his full height and pointing toward the rear of the plane. "Or I'll have security escort you off the tarmac." For a moment, the only sound in the cabin was the clinking of crystal as Genevieve Harrington poured herself a glass of Dom Perignon, watching the scene with the amusement of someone watching a reality TV show. Emma looked at Sterling. She memorized the way his lip curled, the way his name badge sat slightly crooked, the arrogance radiating off him like heat. She thought about reaching into her bag, pulling out the transfer documents, and ending his career right there on the spot. But she stopped. "No," she thought. "If I fire him now, the flight is cancelled. The crew goes home. I don't see how deep the rot goes. She needed to see the full show. She needed to see exactly how Aurora Aviation treated people when they thought there were no consequences. Slowly, deliberately, Emma unbuckled her seatbelt. "Very well, Captain," she said. Her voice was ice. "I wouldn't want to disrupt your delicate weight balance." Sterling smirked, a victorious, ugly expression. "Smart girl. Sarah, put her in the aft jump seat. We need the main cabin clear for Mr. Harrington's associates if they decide to board last minute." There were no other associates. The manifest was closed. Sterling was kicking her out of the luxury cabin entirely, relegating her to the crew seat in the back, usually reserved for flight attendants during takeoff or extra mechanics. It was a seat with no recline, no view, and zero comfort. Emma stood up. She grabbed her bag. "Finally." Preston Harrington grunted from across the aisle. "Some people have no self-awareness. Good job, Rick." "Anything for you, Mr. Harrington?" Sterling beamed, his voice transforming instantly into sycophantic honey. "Let's get that champagne topped off." Emma walked down the aisle. The carpet felt like quicksand. She passed the mid-cabin divans, the dining table set with fine china, and the large aft lavatory. Every step was a lesson in humiliation. Sarah, the flight attendant, was waiting at the back near the galley. To her credit, she looked uncomfortable. She wouldn't meet Emma's eyes. I'm really sorry, Mom," Sarah whispered, as she guided Emma to the small, stiff fold-down seat near the baggage hold door. "Captain Sterling can be particular about the seating arrangements." "Is he always like this?" Emma asked, sitting down on the hard cushion. She strapped herself in. The seat was tight, her knees almost touching the galley bulkhead. Sarah glanced toward the cockpit to ensure they were alone. "Only with certain passengers. He protects the whales, the big spenders. He thinks if he keeps them happy, he'll get a private placement on their personal jets eventually. He wants off the charter circuit." "I see," Emma said, her mind racing. "And he assumes I'm not a whale." Sarah looked at Emma's coat. It was high quality, but it wasn't a mink. "He judges quickly. I'm sorry. I can bring you a glass of wine once we're airborne. But I can't serve the Dom Perignon. He said that's for the Harringtons only." Emma almost laughed. It was absurd, it was grotesque, and it was perfect. "Don't worry about the wine, Sarah," Emma said, leaning her head back against the wall. "Just do your job." From her vantage point in the shadows of the galley, Emma watched the front of the plane. She saw Sterling emerge from the cockpit one last time to shake Preston Harrington's hand. She saw them laughing, pointing at the empty seat 1A, then gesturing vaguely toward the back of the plane. They were mocking her. Sterling returned to the cockpit, slamming the heavy door shut. A moment later, the intercom crackled to life. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard the flagship of Aurora Aviation. This is Captain Sterling. We're looking at a smooth ride to London tonight, cruising at 45,000 feet, well above the weather. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the service. We treat our guests like royalty." The engines of the Gulf Stream whined to life, a high-pitched scream that vibrated through the thin wall behind Emma's back. The plane began to taxi. Emma pulled her phone out of her pocket. She had 1 bar of signal left before they hit the runway. She opened her secure messaging app and typed a message to her chief legal officer, Marcus Thorne. To M. Thorne, CLO. Subject: Immediate action, Aurora acquisition. I'm on flight 704. Execute the clean slate protocol immediately upon my landing in London. Have the ground team meet the plane and find out everything you can about a Captain Richard Sterling. I want his entire personnel file ready when I touch down. She hit send just as the plane turned onto the active runway. The G650ER surged forward, the power of the Rolls-Royce engines pressing Emma back into the uncomfortable jump seat. As the wheels left the snowy tarmac of Teterboro, Emma Vance stared at the galley wall. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a waste of energy. She was calculating. Captain Sterling thought he had just put a nobody in her place. He had no idea he had just strapped the executioner to his back. The flight was 6 hours long. That was 6 hours for Emma to plan exactly how she was going to dismantle Richard Sterling's world, piece by piece, and it would be a Christmas he would never forget. The Gulf Stream leveled off at 45,000 feet, cruising smoothly in the thin, icy air of the stratosphere. In the forward cabin, the atmosphere was one of golden light and clinking crystal. In the aft galley, however, the air was cold, smelling faintly of sanitizing fluid and the recirculated air of the baggage hold. Emma Vance shifted in the jump seat. The padding was non-existent, a flat slab of industrial foam designed for short durations, not a transatlantic crossing. Every vibration of the tail stabilizer traveled directly up her spine. She could hear them, the Harringtons. Their laughter drifted back like smoke, loud and uninhibited. "More caviar, Rick," Preston Harrington's voice boomed. "Don't be shy. I know you pilots eat those frozen trays." "I wouldn't say no to a taste, Mr. Harrington," Captain Sterling's voice replied, smooth and ingratiating. "We aim to please, but you're treating us tonight." Emma stared at the bulkhead wall. It was a violation of protocol for the pilot to be eating the passengers' food and socializing to that extent while on duty, even with a co-pilot flying. Sterling wasn't just arrogant. He was unprofessional. He was treating her $65 million asset like his personal clubhouse. A few minutes later, the heavy velvet curtain separating the galley from the main cabin swished open. Sarah, the flight attendant, slipped through. She looked exhausted. Her smile had vanished, replaced by the tight jaw of a woman trying to keep it together. She held a small plastic tray in her hands. "I managed to heat this up for you," Sarah whispered, crouching down so she wouldn't be seen from the main cabin. "It's the crew meal, lasagna. It's not the lobster thermidor they're having up front, but it's hot." Emma looked at the tray. It was standard aviation catering, passable, but humble. "Thank you, Sarah," Emma said, her voice genuine. "You don't have to do this. Sterling made it clear I'm cargo." Sarah sighed, leaning against the counter. She checked the curtain again. "Sterling is... well, he's difficult. He's been trying to get hired by Harrington's private flight department for months. He thinks if he treats him like a king and keeps the riffraff away, Harrington will poach him from Aurora." "Riffraff," Emma repeated, tasting the word. It was bitter. "He doesn't know who you are," Sarah said quickly. "I mean, I don't know who you are either, but nobody deserves to be spoken to like that, especially not on Christmas Eve." Emma took a bite of the lasagna. It was lukewarm. "Tell me, Sarah, does he do this often? Move paying customers?" Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting away. "I need this job, Ma'am. I have a little girl at home. If I talk and he finds out—" "He won't find out," Emma said. She locked eyes with the young woman. "I promise you, anything you say stays here." Sarah bit her lip. "Last month, flight to Dubai. A young tech entrepreneur, Indian gentleman. Sterling made him wait on the tarmac for 40 minutes because a famous actress was running late. Then he bumped the man's assistant to economy on a commercial flight to make room for the actress's dogs. He calls it strategic hospitality. He says the company loves it because it keeps the billionaires happy." Emma nodded slowly. Strategic hospitality. It was a fancy term for discrimination. "Go back out there," Emma said softly. "Don't let them see you talking to the help." Sarah gave a weak smile and slipped back through the curtain. Emma sat alone in the dim light. She closed her eyes and let the humiliation wash over her. It was a familiar feeling, one she hadn't felt in years. It took her back to her childhood in Chicago, watching her mother scrub floors in houses just like the ones the Harringtons owned. She remembered the way the homeowners would step over her mother as if she were a piece of furniture. She had worked 20-hour days for 15 years to ensure she would never be furniture again. She had built Vance Global Logistics from a single warehouse into an empire. She had bought Aurora Aviation to diversify her portfolio. And yet, here she was, a black woman in a trench coat, banished to the back of her own plane because a man with silver hair and a gold badge decided she didn't look the part. The curtain whipped open again. This time, it wasn't Sarah. Captain Sterling filled the small space. He had a napkin in his hand and a glass of sparkling water. He loomed over Emma, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of malice and amusement. "Cozy?" he asked, leaning against the lavatory door. Emma didn't blink. "It's quiet." "Good," Sterling said. "That's how we like it. Quiet and out of the way." He took a sip of his water, watching her. "You know, I did you a favor. You wouldn't have fit in up there. The conversation is elevated, high finance, real estate, matters of consequence. You would have been bored." "I know a little about finance," Emma said, her voice dangerously calm. Sterling chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "I'm sure you do. Balancing a checkbook is very important. But Mr. Harrington is moving markets. That's the difference between passengers and guests." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The smell of expensive cologne and the garlic from the passengers' dinner clung to him. "Let me give you a piece of advice, free of charge." Sterling lowered his voice. "When you land in London, don't complain. Don't write a review. Don't call customer service. Because in this industry, names go on lists. And if I put your name on the do not fly list for being disruptive, you'll be taking the ferry next time." "Disruptive?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "I haven't said a word." "Your presence in seat 1A was disruptive," Sterling said, his face hardening. "Some people just bring down the property value of the cabin. You understand?" Emma felt a cold fire ignite in her chest. It wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was hate. Pure, unadulterated bias wrapped in a pilot's uniform. "I understand perfectly, Captain," Emma said. "I understand exactly what you see when you look at me." "Good." Sterling crushed his empty plastic cup and tossed it into the trash bin next to Emma's knee. "Stay put. We've got 4 hours left. Don't make me come back here." He turned and marched back toward the cockpit, the curtain swaying in his wake. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She opened the Notes app and began to type. She wasn't just documenting the incident anymore. She was drafting the termination clauses. She detailed the time, the quote, the threat, property value. She looked at her reflection in the darkened porthole window of the emergency exit. "Merry Christmas, Richard," she whispered to the glass. "Enjoy it. It's your last one in the sky." 2 hours later, the atmosphere on the plane had shifted from jovial to jagged. Emma could tell by the change in the noise level. The laughter from the Harringtons had turned raucous, slurred, and aggressive. The clinking of glasses was constant. They were drinking the bar dry. From her seat, Emma heard the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. "Oh, for God's sake, girl!" Preston Harrington's voice bellowed, echoing through the cabin. "Look what you did! That's a $5,000 suit!" "I'm so sorry, sir." Sarah's voice was trembling, bordering on tears. "The turbulence. The glass slipped." "Turbulence my ass!" Preston shouted. "You're clumsy, incompetent. I should have you fired before we touch the ground." Emma unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up, her legs stiff from the cramped seating. She waited, listening. "Preston, darling, calm down," Genevieve Harrington drawled, sounding bored rather than concerned. "She's just a flight attendant. Don't raise your blood pressure." "It's the principal, Jen," Preston slurred. "I pay 50 grand for a charter. I expect service, not a shower." Then there was a sound that made Emma's blood freeze. A scuffle, a gasp. "Sir, please let go of my arm," Sarah said, her voice rising in panic. "You're hurting me." "I'm showing you the stain you made," Preston snarled. That was it. Emma Vance didn't walk. She marched. She swept the velvet curtain aside and stepped into the main cabin. The scene was grotesque. The cabin was littered with napkins and empty bottles. Preston Harrington, red-faced and sweating, had Sarah by the wrist, pulling her down toward his seat. Sarah was pulling back, terror in her eyes. Genevieve was scrolling on her phone, ignoring it completely. "Let her go," Emma said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the cabin noise like a razor blade. Preston Harrington froze. He looked up, squinting, as if trying to remember who this intruder was. He released Sarah's arm, and the flight attendant stumbled back, clutching her wrist. "Who the hell are you?" Preston spat. "Oh, right, the stowaway, the charity case." "I said," Emma repeated, stepping closer, standing tall in the aisle. "Keep your hands off the crew." Preston laughed, a wet, ugly sound. He looked toward the cockpit. "Hey, Rick, get out here. Your garbage is talking to me." The cockpit door opened immediately. Captain Sterling emerged, looking annoyed at the interruption. He took in the scene. Preston flushed and angry, Sarah crying in the corner, and Emma standing defiantly in the center of the aisle. Sterling didn't ask what happened. He didn't check on his flight attendant. He turned immediately on Emma. "I told you to stay in your seat," Sterling barked, his face turning a shade of purple. "Your passenger just assaulted your flight attendant," Emma said, pointing at Sarah. He grabbed her. "He's drunk and he's physically aggressive. You need to restrain him." Sterling looked at Preston, then at Emma. The calculation in his eyes was transparent. On one side, a billionaire real estate mogul. On the other, a nobody. "Mr. Harrington is a valued client," Sterling said, his voice dripping with disdain. "If he says it was an accident, it was an accident." "He grabbed me, Captain," Sarah sobbed, holding her wrist. "He wouldn't let go." "Quiet, Sarah," Sterling snapped without looking at her. "Go to the galley and clean yourself up. Stop making a scene." He turned back to Emma, stepping into her personal space, using his height to intimidate. "And you? You are interfering with a flight crew. Do you know what the penalty is for that?" "Protecting a crew member from assault isn't interference." Emma held her ground. Her eyes bored into his. "It's your job, Captain. A job you are failing at spectacularly." The cabin went silent. Even Preston looked shocked. Nobody spoke to Captain Sterling like that. Sterling's nostrils flared. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of plastic flex cuffs, standard issue for unruly passengers. "That's it," Sterling hissed. "I warned you. I gave you a chance to be invisible. Now you're going to be a prisoner." He grabbed Emma's arm. "Don't touch me," Emma said. She didn't struggle, but her tone was so authoritative that Sterling actually hesitated for a split second. "You represent a threat to the safety of this flight," Sterling recited the protocol, though his voice shook with rage. "I am ordering you to return to the jump seat. If you say one more word, if you take one step toward Mr. Harrington, I will restrain you and have the Metropolitan Police meet us at the gate. You'll spend Christmas in a cell." "You're making a mistake," Emma said quietly. "A very expensive mistake." "The only mistake was letting you on this plane," Preston jeered from his seat, raising a fresh glass of scotch. "Lock her up, Rick. I'll testify she was crazy, screaming, throwing things. We all saw it, right, Jen?" Genevieve didn't look up from her phone. "Whatever you say, darling." Sterling smirked. It was the smirk of a bully who had the teacher on his side. "You heard the witnesses. Now. Back. Move." Emma looked at Sarah. The flight attendant was weeping silently, pressing a towel to her bruised wrist. She looked at Preston, bloated with privilege. She looked at Sterling, drunk on a power he didn't truly possess. Emma smoothed the lapel of her trench coat. She shook off Sterling's hand. "I'll move," Emma said. "I'll sit in the back. But mark this moment, Captain. Remember exactly where you were standing when you decided to protect a predator instead of your crew." "Get out of my face," Sterling spat. Emma turned. She walked back down the aisle, past the luxury she owned, past the employees she paid, and into the darkness of the galley. She sat down in the jump seat and buckled the belt. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of restraint. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them right then and there. But the trap wasn't fully sprung yet. She needed him to land the plane. She needed him to log the incident. She needed him to file the false report. She needed him to dig the hole so deep that he would never, ever climb out of it. She checked her phone. The signal was returning as they began their descent toward the UK. She had a reply from Marcus Thorne. From M. Thorne, CLO. Subject, Re. Immediate action. Ground team is in position at Luton. Police liaison is with them. Employment contracts for all crew on Flight 704 have been pulled. Personnel file for Sterling is enlightening. We are ready on your command. Emma typed one final message. 2. M. Thorne. Message. Add false imprisonment and aiding and abetting assault to the list of charges. And Marcus, bring the car around to the tarmac. I want to drive away before the handcuffs go on Sterling. The plane dipped, the engines whining as the flaps extended. Below them, the lights of London twinkled in the dark, cold night. Emma watched the lights rise to meet them. "Landing gear down," she whispered. It was time to bring the hammer down. The descent into London Luton Airport was a masterclass in piloting, even if the man behind the yoke was morally bankrupt. The Gulfstream G650R sliced through the low-hanging cloud deck, the runway lights emerging from the mist like strings of diamonds on black velvet. In the aft galley, the mood was funereal. Sarah sat in the jump seat opposite Emma, clutching her bruised wrist. She had stopped crying, but her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the cold reality of her situation. "I'm going to lose my job," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the rush of the air conditioning. "Harrington will file a complaint. Sterling will back him up. They'll say I was clumsy or rude. I'll be blacklisted." Emma unbuckled her seatbelt as the plane taxied off the active runway. She leaned forward, placing a hand gently on Sarah's knee. "You are not going to lose your job, Sarah," Emma said, her voice firm, anchoring the young woman. "And you are not going to be blacklisted. Tonight is going to change things. You just have to trust me." Sarah looked up, confused. "How can you stop them? You saw them. They run the world." "They think they do," Emma corrected, "but they just rent space in it." The plane slowed to a crawl. Through the small galley window, Emma saw they were bypassing the main terminal. They were heading toward the private Harrods Aviation Terminal, but then they turned again, moving toward a secluded remote stand at the far end of the tarmac. "That's strange," Sarah murmured, looking out. "We usually park at stand 2. Why are we going to the remote apron?" "Maybe the captain requested extra privacy for the arrest," Emma said dryly. The engines spooled down, the high-pitched whine fading into a low hum before cutting out completely. Silence flooded the cabin. A heavy, suffocating silence. The cockpit door opened. Captain Sterling emerged, buttoning his blazer, checking his reflection in the bulkhead mirror. He put on his hat, adjusting the brim until it sat perfectly straight. He looked every inch the professional aviator, a mask hiding the rot underneath. He walked past the galley without looking at Emma, heading straight for the main cabin to fawn over the Harringtons. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington," Sterling's voice drifted back, dripping with charm. "Welcome to London. My apologies again for the friction during the flight. I assure you, the authorities have been notified. We'll have that unpleasantness removed shortly so you can disembark in peace." "About time," Preston grumbled. "Make sure she doesn't come near us. I don't want her begging for money." "I'll handle it personally," Sterling promised. Sterling marched back to the galley. He stopped in front of Emma, blocking the exit. He loomed over her, his face set in a hard, triumphant sneer. "Sit down," he ordered, though Emma was already seated. "The stairs are opening. The Harringtons are leaving first. You will wait here until security comes on board to escort you off." "I'm not disrupting anyone, Richard," Emma said calmly. "I'm just a passenger waiting to deplane." "You're a liability," Sterling spat, "and I've already radioed the FBO. I told them we have a non-compliant passenger who threatened the safety of the flight. Do you know what the UK authorities do with people who threaten aircraft safety? They don't ask questions. They detain." He looked at Sarah. "And you. Fix your face. Stand by the door and smile as the Harringtons leave. If I hear one word about your wrist, you're fired before you get to the hotel. Clear?" Sarah nodded, trembling. "Yes, Captain." Sterling pressed the button to lower the air stairs. The hydraulics hissed, and the door swung outward, revealing the damp, biting cold of the English winter. Emma sat perfectly still. She listened to the heavy footsteps of the Harringtons as they gathered their furs and bags. She heard Preston's loud, boorish laugh as he stepped past the galley. "Good riddance to bad rubbish," Preston muttered as he passed Emma, not even making eye contact. Emma waited. She counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. She checked her watch. It was 2:00 a.m. local time. Marcus Thorne would be freezing, but he would be there. He was always there. "All right," Sterling said, turning back to Emma after the Harringtons had descended. He gestured to the open door with a mock bow. "Your turn, Your Highness. The carriage awaits. Or should I say, the paddy wagon." Emma stood up. She picked up her bag. She adjusted the collar of her trench coat. She looked at Sterling, studying his face one last time. She wanted to remember exactly what he looked like before his world disintegrated. "After you, Captain," Emma said. "I insist." Sterling scoffed. "Fine. I'll make sure the officers are ready for you." He turned and walked down the stairs, his boots clanking on the metal steps. Emma followed 3 steps behind him, descending into the cold mist of the tarmac. The air on the tarmac was frigid, carrying the scent of Jet A1 fuel and rain. As Captain Sterling reached the bottom of the stairs, he stopped abruptly. His confident stride faltered. Usually, a charter arrival was met by a simple luxury van or a town car for the VIPs, and perhaps a small airport security car if there was an issue. But tonight, the tarmac looked like a presidential motorcade. 3 massive black SUVs with tinted windows were parked in a semicircle around the nose of the jet, their headlights cut through the fog, illuminating the wet pavement. Beside them stood a sleek, silver Rolls-Royce Phantom, its engine purring silently. Standing in front of the Rolls-Royce was a group of 4 people. In the center was Marcus Thorne. He was a tall, imposing man with skin the color of mahogany and a tailored suit that cost more than Sterling made in a year. He wore a long wool overcoat and held a black umbrella. Flanking him were two men who looked like military contractors, broad-shouldered, earpieces, hands clasped stoically in front of them. Beside them stood a woman with a tablet, looking sharp and terrifyingly efficient. The Harringtons were standing awkwardly by the wing, looking confused. Their own driver was nowhere to be seen. Sterling recovered his composure quickly. He assumed this show of force was for him, or rather, for the protection of his precious VIPs against the crazy woman on the plane. He puffed out his chest and walked toward Marcus Thorne, hand extended. "Officer," Sterling said, assuming Thorne was some high-ranking airport police or security chief. "I'm Captain Sterling. Thank you for the quick response. The disruptive passenger is right behind me. She's been aggressive, non-compliant and—" Thorne didn't shake the hand. He didn't even look at it. Thorne's eyes, cold and calculating, looked right through Sterling as if he were made of glass. He stepped to the side, completely bypassing the pilot. Sterling blinked, his hand left hanging in the air. "Excuse me?" "Sir? I'm talking to you. I need to file the report against—" Thorne walked past him. He walked straight to the bottom of the stairs where Emma Vance had just stepped onto the pavement. The two security guards snapped to attention. The woman with the tablet stepped forward. Thorne bowed his head slightly, a gesture of profound respect. "Miss Vance," Thorne said, his voice deep and smooth. "Welcome to London. I trust the flight was illuminating?" Sterling froze. He turned around slowly, a confused smile plastered on his face. "Ms. Vance?" Emma stood at the bottom of the stairs. The wind whipped her coat around her legs, but she stood like a statue. She looked at Thorne, then slowly shifted her gaze to Sterling. "Illuminating is one word for it, Marcus," Emma said. "Another word would be actionable." Emma walked past Sterling. She didn't look at him. She walked toward the Harringtons, who were watching with open mouths. "You," Preston Harrington blurted out, pointing a finger. "What is this? Who are these people? Rick, tell them to get her out of here." Emma stopped in front of Preston. She looked at his finger until he lowered it. "Marcus," Emma said, her voice carrying easily in the silent night. "Please introduce me to the captain and his guests. I don't think they know who's paying for the fuel tonight." Marcus Thorne turned to face the group. He adjusted his cufflinks, savoring the moment. "Captain Sterling, Mr. Harrington," Thorne began, his tone clinical. "This is Emma Vance. She is the founder and CEO of Vance Global Logistics." Sterling let out a nervous chuckle. "Logistics? So she's a shipping clerk? Look, I don't care who—" "She is also," Thorne interrupted, raising his voice just a decibel, "the majority shareholder of the Priority Global Group." Thorne paused for effect. He looked at the logo on the side of the jet, the Aurora Aviation insignia. "Which, as of 72 hours ago," Thorne continued, "acquired a 100% controlling interest in Aurora Aviation." The silence that followed was absolute. The wind seemed to stop. The distant hum of the airport faded away. Sterling's face went slack. The color drained from his cheeks so fast it looked like he was about to faint. He looked at the plane. He looked at Emma. He looked at the logo on his own chest. "She," Sterling stammered. "She owns—" "The plane," Emma finished for him. She stepped closer to Sterling, her voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a thunderclap. "I own the plane, Richard. I own the fuel in the wings. I own the seat you sat in. I own the uniform on your back." Sterling opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape, looking for a joke, looking for anything that made this a nightmare he could wake up from. Preston Harrington, however, wasn't smart enough to be scared yet. He was just angry. "So what?" Preston sneered, though his voice wavered. She bought a company. Good for her. I charter this plane. I'm the customer, and the customer is king. I pay your bills, lady. Emma turned to Preston. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Marcus, Emma said, do we have Mr. Harrington's contract for the return leg to New York on the 28th? We do, ma'am, the woman with the tablet spoke up, tapping the screen. Confirmed and paid. Cancel it, Emma said. Now wait a minute, Preston shouted, stepping forward. One of the security guards stepped in his path, a wall of muscle blocking him. Refund his money in full, Emma continued, ignoring Preston's outburst, and issue a corporate-wide directive. Mr. Preston Harrington and any entity associated with him are barred from flying on Aurora Aviation, Vance Global, or any affiliate carrier, effective immediately. You can't do that, Preston screamed, his face turning red. I'm a platinum member. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. You can try, Emma said calmly, but you'll find it hard to get to a meeting on time when you're flying commercial. I hear Heathrow is terrible this time of year. She turned back to Sterling. He was trembling now. The reality of what he had done, the insults, the jump seat, the threats, was crashing down on him. Miss Vance, Sterling croaked. Ma'am, I didn't know. It was a misunderstanding. I was just trying to protect the brand. The brand? Emma repeated. You think abusing a passenger and enabling a drunk to assault your crew protects the brand? Assault? Sterling whispered. No, that was... Sarah, Emma called out toward the plane. Sarah was standing at the top of the stairs, shivering, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. Come down here, please, Emma said gently. Sarah descended the stairs, holding her wrist. She looked terrified. Sarah, Emma said, gesturing to the Rolls-Royce, you're riding with me. We're going to a doctor to document that wrist, and then we're going to the police station to file a report against Mr. Harrington for assault. Sarah looked at Sterling, who was staring at his shoes. Are you sure? I am, Emma said. And don't worry about your schedule. You're on paid leave until you recover, and when you come back, you'll be promoted to lead cabin trainer. I want you teaching the new crews how real hospitality works. Sarah burst into tears. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing with relief. Emma turned to Sterling one last time. As for you, Captain, Emma said, hand over your badge. Miss Vance, please, Sterling begged, his voice cracking. I have a mortgage. It's Christmas. Please let me explain. You explained everything on the plane, Emma said coldly. You explained that I was cargo. You explained that I lowered the property value. You explained exactly who you are. She held out her hand. Badge. Now. With shaking hands, Richard Sterling unpinned the gold wings from his chest, the wings he had worn with such arrogance only hours before. He placed them in Emma's palm. You are relieved of command, Mr. Sterling, Emma said, closing her hand over the metal. You are terminated for cause. Gross misconduct, failure to protect the crew, and discriminatory practices. You'll find your severance package is non-existent. She turned to Marcus. Make sure he doesn't get back on the plane to get his bag. Mail it to him. Understood, Marcus said. Emma put her arm around Sarah's shoulders. Come on. Let's get out of the cold. They walked toward the Rolls-Royce. The driver opened the door. Behind them, on the wet tarmac, stood a billionaire who had lost his ride, and a pilot who had lost his wings. The snow began to fall again, covering them both in white, erasing them from the picture as Emma Vance's motorcade swept away into the night. The taillights of the Rolls-Royce faded into the mist, leaving a silence on the Luton tarmac that was heavier than the snow. Captain Richard Stirling stood by his kit bag, the snow rapidly dampening the shoulders of his blazer, a blazer that no longer carried the wings of authority. Next to him, Preston Harrington was frantically tapping on his phone, his face bathed in the pale blue light of the screen. "My assistant isn't picking up," Preston snarled, kicking his Louis Vuitton duffel bag. "This is absurd. I'm going to sue that woman for every penny she has. Abandonment. Breach of contract." Stirling stared at the empty space where the car had been. "She owns the contract, Mr. Harrington. She owns the lawyers. She owns the sky." "Shut up, Rick," Preston yelled. "This is your fault. You said she was nobody. You said she was cargo." Stirling didn't answer. He couldn't. The cold seeping into his bones wasn't just the weather. It was the chilling realization that his career was over. In the tight-knit world of private aviation, word traveled faster than a jet stream. By morning, everyone from Teterboro to Dubai would know he had been fired for cause by the owner of the company, for discrimination and enabling assault. He looked up at the Gulfstream GS650IR. It was beautiful, gleaming under the floodlights. It was the pinnacle of his career, and he would never step foot inside a cockpit like that again. 6 months later, the hangar in rural Ohio smelled of oil, rust, and stale coffee. It was a far cry from the orchid-scented cabin of a Gulfstream. Richard Stirling wiped grease from his hands with a dirty rag. He was wearing a jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big, the name tag reading simply, Rick. "Hey, Rick," a voice shouted from the office. "Get that cargo loaded. We got a deadline. The auto parts aren't going to fly themselves to Cleveland." "I'm going, boss," Stirling muttered. He walked toward the aircraft. It wasn't a jet. It was a battered, 30-year-old twin-propeller cargo plane that rattled even when it was parked. There were no passengers, no champagne, no heated leather seats, just boxes of mufflers and brake pads. He had applied to Delta, United, even the regional carriers. The rejection letters were identical. "After reviewing your file..." Emma Vance hadn't just fired him. She had ensured his personnel file contained the unvarnished truth of that Christmas Eve. He was flagged as a liability. The "do not hire" list he used to threaten passengers with. He was now at the top of the corporate version. As he climbed into the freezing cockpit of the cargo plane, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. "Suggested post for you. Vance Global Aviation launches the Stirling Initiative." He froze. He clicked the link. There was a video playing. It showed Emma Vance standing at a podium, looking radiant and powerful. Next to her, looking professional and confident in a tailored suit, was Sarah, the flight attendant he had silenced. Emma spoke to the camera. "Today we are launching the Stirling Initiative. It is a comprehensive training program for flight crews, focused on dignity, anti-discrimination, and the empowerment of staff to stand up against harassment. It is named after a lesson we learned the hard way, that the value of a person is never determined by the seat they occupy." The camera cut to Sarah, who was smiling. "As the new Vice President of Crew Welfare, I'm proud to lead this charge." Stirling stared at the screen. They had named the anti-bullying program after him. His name would forever be synonymous with the very behavior he was guilty of. It was the ultimate, permanent mark of shame. He threw the phone onto the empty co-pilot seat. It bounced and fell onto the floor mat. He fired up the engines. They sputtered and coughed, shaking the rusty airframe. "Clear prop," he whispered to no one. He pushed the throttle forward, taxiing out onto the cracked runway. As he lifted off into the grey, overcast sky, carrying a load of car parts for minimum wage, Richard Stirling finally understood the weight and balance he had ignored for so long. He had tipped the scales against himself, and now he had to carry the load. What a journey. Emma Vance showed us that true power isn't about how loud you can yell or how expensive your suit is. It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. Captain Sterling and Preston Harrington thought their status gave them the right to trample on others, but they forgot that the wheel of fortune is always turning. Emma didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She protected her employee, Sarah, and turned a moment of humiliation into a movement for change. It's a powerful reminder that you never truly know who you are talking to. The person you dismiss today could be the one signing your paycheck or sealing your fate tomorrow. In a world full of Captain Sterlings, be an Emma. Stand your ground, keep your dignity, and when the time is right, let your success make the noise. Wow, talk about a satisfying ending. I think we can all agree that seeing Sterling flying old cargo planes is exactly the karma he deserved. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated or mistreated by someone who thought they were above you? How did you handle it? Did karma ever come back around? Let me know your story in the comments down below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more dramas about justice and karma hitting back, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that nice guys and gals don't always finish last. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.